Hey, how's it going everyone? In today's video, I'm not going to teach you how the CSS not selector works. Actually, I am going to teach you. So let's just take a look at what we're going to do in this video. Let me just take my face off. And there we go. Hey, I'm smaller. Okay, this is our little project. You can download everything that you see here. The link is down in the description below. As always, the code is on my blog. And after you download it, the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript part, because as you can see, this little thingy here, it's just randomly selecting one of them and turning the background, as you can see what it's doing. But nevertheless, download the HTML, download the CSS, download the JavaScript, and if you're done, come back to the video and let's get started. I believe you're done, so we can get started. So this is what you should get. It's a HTML where we're going to have a navigation with some classes, pre-standard navigation. Then you're going to have a title, is this H1 right here, then a subtitle, which is this one right here, then a main tag that is going to have a couple of articles. Those articles are going to have a couple of subtitles and paragraph tags, and one of the paragraph tags has a highlighted class to it. And then JavaScript, you take a look in our JavaScript, is just going to toggle that class on and off using a set interval function, callback function, which is just going to set it and then unset it. Now in your CSS, there's just the basic styling for everything that you see in here. So I'm thinking I'm just going to boop, do this, then do this, close this one up. And right down here, where you have your CSS not, this comment, we can start out by creating our code. So first things first, what does CSS not selector do? Well, the not CSS pseudo-class, which is actually a pseudo-class, exactly as we learned in our has and is pseudo-classes in the previous videos, represents elements that do not match a list of selectors, since prevents items from being selected. Okay, so pretty straightforward. Basically, you can exclude everything that should not, you know what, I'm just going to show you. So very first example, let's say we want this. If you take a look at our HTML, first of all, you have a couple of H2s. Now, one of the H2s is outside of this main class, main tag, and it is also not in any kind of article. So it's basically this single standing H2 right here, which is this one. So basically this H2 is a single H2 that is not included anywhere. And now what I want you to do is remove the class of subtitle from it. So let's just remove that class of subtitle. You can see the color changes to dark. Now let's go into our CSS and let's say the H2 that does not, so column, not selector, open and close parenthesis. Now wherever you include in the parenthesis will be the argument which will be then excluded. In our case, subtitle. And let's say we want every H2 that does not have the class of subtitle to have a text, a line of center, for example. Okay. Although these right here, these H2s, I could do a H2 text center, then all of them will be affected. But if I have this not selector, for example, if I would now exclude those H2s that are not in a article, then I could do something like this, article and H2. And I'm just going to comment this part out. And you can see I will have the same result. If I comment this out, H2 is moving back there, but if I'm telling it, hey, find those H2s that are not in an article. If we take a look in our little code here on HTML, the only H2 that is not in an article is then this one. Pretty simple, isn't it? Let's take another example, this span tags. You can see we have two span tags. One of them is in a H1, the other one is in a H2. So we can do it either way. I could do span tag, and let's say span tag that is not in a H2. I hope you know this selector. This means that this element has the parent element as an H2. So let's say the span tags that are not in an H2 should have the color of gray. Okay, and there we go. Only this span tag that is in the H1 will have the color gray. Now let's move on. Let's do something more complex. You will see in your navigation that you have here, where's the navigation? Okay, there we go. We have multiple LIs, list items. Those list items are in an unordered list and they make up our navigation. So let's say that the list items that are not, for example, the first child, those should have the font weight increased to, let's say, bolder. Okay, let's hit save. Now all of them have the font weight includes the boulder, excepting the very first one. Why is this? Well, we just excluded the very first child. Now you could also continue with this and say, let's add to this another not, and let's say we're going to also exclude the last child. And if I do this, then both of them, only the second and the third child will have. Let's also change the, I think that boulder didn't take that, isn't that obvious what it's doing. So let's do also opacity of 0.3. Okay, and they are hardly visible. Now, if I would do here a color of white, this is normally a pretty common problem. Those LIs contain actual anchor tags, and those anchor tags need to be selected either by the tag itself or by the classes if they have one. So in our case, we could do here something like anchor tag that is not included in a UL, in an unordered list. Whoops, what just happened here? Is to have a color of white. Let's say do something like that, and all of them. Sorry, I meant LI. Now only the bottom one will have the color white. Now we can exclude, for example, let's do here a not example on our anchor tags. Anchor tags that are not in a LI should now have a color of white. And there we go, only this one, the bottom one that is in the footer, if you take a look in our HTML, only this fellow right here that is in the footer will have the color white. So let's do something more complex. What if I want to change this? I'm going to also leave this in here. What if I want to target something extremely specific? Only those anchor tags that have a href, so I can target also their properties. Href, also need here that little sign there, that have their href as HTTPS should have color white. I can see everything is changing, and if I exclude this one right here, then the bottom one will remain yellow, and only the above items will have the color white, because none of them have an HTTP have an href of HTTPS. You can also take a look in your HTML. Okay, you can also delete them if you wish, so you won't be confused. Okay, let's do something. Oh, wait. For example, you can transform this. You can see I added here two knots. I'm going to two knots. Oh man, sorry about that. No pun intended. So I'm going to comment this one out. Also comment it out completely, so you can see it will no longer have effect. Okay, now I'm going to comment it back in. And instead of having parentheses, not, and parentheses, I'm going to delete these two and just do a comma, and it's going to have the same effect. So you can also add multiple properties within here. So let's give another example here. Let's say the h2 that has a span tag, but the span tag is not in an article. So I'm going to exclude the h2, because remember, we're targeting the span tag, but we're telling it that it should look for a span tag that is not, that its parent is not an h2 contained in an article, should have the color, let's say red. And there we go. Although this is kind of complex, but at the end of the day, you can see how helpful this can be when you're not using something like Sass, a precompiler. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the CSS not selector. Hope